sorry that... Actually, I'm not really sorry that all the seats are full, because that's what you want for an NHS meeting. But I'm sorry if people haven't got a seat. In which case, I think we can start. As I said, sorry to those people who are having to stand. It's quite nice, actually, having every seat full for a public meeting. And it's absolutely right that this room should be absolutely packed out, because we're here because we love and want to defend our NHS, aren't we? Bit out of tune there. So I'm Eve Turner, and I'm from Ealing Save Our NHS, who's organised the meeting today, and I'm here like all the campaigners in Ealing Save Our NHS because we love our NHS and we're passionate and determined to fight for it. And that's, of course, as I said, why everybody is here today. I just want to say who Ealing Save Our NHS is, because we get called all sorts of things. We get called Ealing Save Our Hospitals, Ealing this and Ealing that. So we have been going for about 5 years. We are Ealing Save Our NHS, and we're deliberately not Ealing Save Our Hospitals. We're Ealing Save Our NHS because we are absolutely here to fight for Ealing Hospital. We are totally supporting the campaigners in Hammersmith, but we're here to defend all of the NHS and to fight not just cuts and closures, but also to stop them breaking up and privatising our NHS. So that's why we're called Ealing Save Our NHS. There is, of course, in the borough a Save Our Hospitals campaign, which is run by our council, and we are delighted that we have one of the few councils that's actually prepared to not to sign up to cuts and closures and to campaign in its own right, which is why there's an enormous petition. So a big hand for our council. So I'm just going to remind people very quickly, I'm not going to speak for long because you've probably come to hear all the other speakers, but what we're fighting against is them trying to pretend, and they tell lies. If you go to Ealing Hospital, how many of you have seen that big poster that says Ealing Hospital is not closing? It's very, very prominent. What I would like to see from the management of Ealing Hospital is a big sign that says, no cuts to Ealing Hospital. We're going to stand side by side with patients and side by side by the community. But that's not what we see from the management of Ealing Hospital. Unfortunately, they have gone along with the cuts and are, and that's what they do, and they try to hide it. We have never said that the hospital is totally closing. What we have said as a campaign is that without an A&E, with no operations, with hardly any beds, and nobody being able to go there, and so I'm getting tripped up by our MP, and nobody being able to go there who is seriously ill, that is not a hospital in any sense of the words. Now, is it? That is not a hospital. And so, in some respects, when we say Ealing Hospital is closing, or Save Our Hospital, we are talking about the situation where they are slashing and cutting every acute service, or plan to, within that hospital. We've lost our maternity, a fantastic maternity, which was probably the best maternity in North West London. We've lost our fantastic children's ward, and we are sticking in our heels. We are not going to see them close our A&Es, we're not going to see them shut beds, and we're going to fight every step of the way to stop them cutting our hospital. And we hope that you're going to join with us and do it too if you're not already doing it. Yeah. And I think that's why you're here. So we have got 4 fantastic speakers. Rupa's managed to get here earlier than I expected because she's obviously finished the vote. So on my left, of course, it's Rupa Huck, who is the Ealing Central and Acton MP, and re-elected with a massive big majority because she stood up firm against the hospitals, unlike the Tory candidate. So we've got Rupa. To Rupa's, right, left, that's right. To Rupa's left is John Lister. Quite a few people in this room will know John. John has been one of our heroes. He was there years ago fighting against cuts in the NHS. and sometimes it might have felt that he was banging against a brick wall, but now the brick wall's come down and there are campaigns like us all around the country, and John has played an enormous part in that, and he's been a thorn in the side of all of those who want to cut and privatise our NHS, and John will be our first speaker. Over on my right is Dr. Gurjinder Sandhu, who certainly many people here will know. He has just been this amazing staunch defender of our local hospitals and standing up and fighting against all sorts of pressure and keeping services going, and I'm really delighted that he is here and a big supporter of our campaign as we are of him. And last but not least is Dr. I never pronounce your name, Aislinn Macklin Doherty. Aislinn is also a junior doctor on the front line, a fantastic fighter for the NHS, not just among junior doctors, but in the NHS as a whole. And I'm really proud and delighted that she is here today. So I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm going to introduce John Lister, who's going to kick off today. And once again, thank you everybody for turning up and making what looks like it's going to be a fantastic meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Is this on? I've got the same problem. This is nowhere near as loud. Anyway, can you hear me?
Hang on.
Technicians coming. Yeah, someone's over-adjusted it. It was incredibly loud earlier. Now it's not. Anyway, no doubt a number of you have been absolutely flabbergasted in the last couple of months to find that the weather's got colder. Okay, it's shocking, I know, but you know, somehow in December we even had some snow, some of us, and it's been cold in January. It's cold again in February. What's going? It's winter, right? It's winter. Somehow, altogether now, the NHS has managed to forget we have winter. We have a crisis because it's winter. More people get ill. More people fall on ice. More people have accidents and so on in the winter. There's a greater demand on beds. Suddenly, the NHS no longer has the resources to maintain a full balance of services right around the year. But we've been told we needn't worry because the government has got a master plan. They've got a fantastic plan, the best ever plan apparently for the NHS in the wintertime. And what's the plan? To cancel all the elective operations for January, right? Which fairly much underlines the fact there is not enough capacity for the NHS to deliver services right the year round because of the level of funding that this government has reduced it to. And the reality is, they were warned last year, as last winter ended, and many of you will remember the level of crisis there was last winter. Right around the country, ambulances queuing to discharge patients, having rushed across town with blue lights on, queue for half an hour longer to actually discharge the patient into the hospital. They then wait longer on trolleys to actually get proper care, and then wait even longer if they need a bed in the hospital for treatment. That was shocking last year, and many people regard it as the worst they could remember. I'm just going to mention the 1980s. It's certainly reminiscent of the 1980s. The bad old years when Thatcher had cut NHS spending year after year, and the NHS reduced to major crisis level. We thought that was bad then. NHS providers, which represents the trusts around the country, actually said immediately after that, if the government doesn't put more money in before next winter, in fact they said by August, so we can put systems in place, we will have a worse winter than we've had this time. And they said it again and again, they said it loudly, they said trying to deliver on the budget they were being given by the government was mission impossible. That was their words. These are the trusts that don't normally say boo to a goose. They were speaking up and they said we cannot do it. What did the government do? Absolutely nothing. They ignored the whole appeal that was made for more funding. Simon Stevens, Chief Executive of the NHS, got up and said, we can't do it on more money unless we get more money. They ignored him. They ignored all the warnings. They head into winter, and what have we got? We've got a worse crisis. Surprise, surprise. Here we are in a worse crisis. And you've got to start thinking, well, if this government is taking this firm line, what is it they really want to achieve? What is it? Why do they drive the NHS into this situation? We're in the 8th year of effectively frozen NHS funding in real terms. So it's barely gone up above inflation for each of the last 7 years. And we're into the 8th year of frozen funding. Meanwhile, the population has increased by 4 million. We've got larger numbers of older people within that population. We've got obviously much more pressures as a result of that. Costs of some treatments have gone up. New treatments have come on stream that cost money. The pressures on the NHS are estimated between 3 and 4% a year. We're going to be getting less than 1% a year in increases. Is it surprising that these pressures start to show through in a system that cannot cope? That the targets are missed for waiting for accident emergency treatment? Of course, it's been made worse here in North West London by the ridiculous plans being pushed through to attempt to reconfigure hospital services in North West London, so-called Shaping a Healthier Future. Do you remember that? Shaping a Healthier Future. What an absolutely ridiculous title for something which was planning a whole series of cuts. So we already had the A&Es in central Middlesex and Hammersmith Hospital were shut down. We immediately had the performance in the emergency services off a cliff in North West London. Not just in the hospitals, in the immediate vicinity of those hospitals, right across North West London. Out as far as Hounslow, in as far as central London. Disastrous performance of the hospitals on all the emergency services. That was predictable. We predicted it. Everybody who knew anything about it predicted it. They carried on regardless. And now they keep saying it was a brilliant success, probably like the equivalent of the brilliant plan for the NHS this winter, right? And they're carrying on still the same. And they haven't drawn any lessons at all. And they're headed towards, again, still pressing ahead with these plans to run down those services at Ealing, as Eve mentioned, and the same at Charing Cross Hospital. This is complete and utter madness. To keep doing the same thing when it's proved not to work and hope it's somehow going to turn right in the end is clinical definition, I believe, of madness, or it's one of them, right? It certainly doesn't make any sense, does it? So here we are in this situation. They didn't have to be in it. It was an avoidable crisis. It was a predictable crisis. We predicted, and everybody predicted the crisis, and here it is. And the government, instead of admitting it, start talking the same old nonsense as ever before. So now Theresa May, we're spending more than ever before in the NHS. Well, technically, they are. In terms of pounds, they are. But actually, that doesn't account for the fact we've got more people than ever before. We've got more people than they can treat. We've got more people than they've got equipment and they've got staff to actually deal with. So the reality is, these so silly arguments might sound clever as a soundbite for people who don't think about them, but they don't actually answer the question about how's the NHS going to come through. And of course, on the other hand, you've got private hospitals doing a very nice trade now because people who don't want to wait on growing waiting lists and who can afford to do so are digging into savings or cashing in or whatever, or borrowing from relatives to buy operations privately. And the only people making any money out of it really are the private hospitals doing those cash per case treatments. It's a scandal because we've got people, the NHS should be providing those as absolutely core services. So some of you might remember, meanwhile, back in 1988, 30 years ago, 1988, it was the 40th anniversary year of the NHS, and it started with a massive crisis, and it started with nurses walking out demanding unsocial hours payments, and there was a huge crisis, and Margaret Thatcher announced a review of the NHS, and we were all quaking. What was this review going to come up with? And right throughout 1988, a whole series of completely balmy right-wing plans were hatched up by various Tory MPs, many of which are still Tory MPs, still hatching up balmy plans now. John Redwood, Oliver Letwin, a whole bunch of them were actually there and they're there now, and they're still doing the same stuff now. And actually they came up with plans which are coming back yet again. Same old zombie plans are coming back. Same old nonsense. What do we have to do to kill off these daft ideas? The idea that actually we have a hypothecated tax for the NHS. That we have why would we want a hypothecated tax for the NHS? It's funded from general taxation. You can't get fairer than that. You can't get simpler than that. If you don't raise enough taxes, you don't have enough NHS. A hypothecated tax means that you've got the ability then to underfund it systematically and create conditions where you're forcing people to take out private insurance to cover the difference. That's the reality of a hypothecated tax, and that's why people propose it. and it's a proposal from the balmy right of the Tory party from way back. Or we've got what was the other one? There was where's it gone? Yes, the other cross-party commission. Cross-party commission. Get all the parties together. Let's have a royal commission. Let's have a cross-party commission. Let's talk in general about it. Well, the reality is the parties do not agree on this, because we've got the Labour Party now saying they want to bring back the NHS into public ownership. They want to end privatisation. They want to put billions more into the NHS. That's what the Labour Party are telling us, and they're telling us on campaign platforms. They're joining us on campaign platforms for the first time in 20 years, right? We've got a Labour Party saying the right thing about the NHS, right? And they're saying, no, we don't want a cross-party commission. So who does want a cross-party commission? Well, of course, the Tories do, and the Lib Dems do. They're the people who got us in this mess in the first place, from 2010 onwards. So we're in a situation now where again and again it's becoming really obvious that they got things absolutely seriously wrong. We had, a week or so ago, we had the head of NHS Improvement, which is a laughable title for a regulator, because they hardly done anything to improve it at all. But the guy came on and he said, actually, we've been getting some of these plans are based on unrealistic figures for the number of people we can divert away from Acton and emergency services. He said, we'll have to reconsider some of these plans because clearly more people are coming to A&E than we ever expected. Well, surprise, surprise, that's been happening since 1992 when Virginia Bottomley first came up with the idea of diverting people away from A&E and sending them all to GP surgeries instead. Yeah. And surprise, surprise, people continue to realise that it doesn't make any sense to go to a closed GP practice in the middle of the night, or ring up and leave a message on an answer phone, or get diverted through God knows how many phone calls, when you can go to an A&E 24 hours a day, and there's people there who know how to look after you. And if you've got a minor problem, they can look after you that way, and if you've got a more serious problem, they're there for you as well. And it's a perfectly logical, sensible thing to go to an A&E where you know where it is, where you know it's open, rather than take a chance on some of these other services that have been expensively put into place to try to get you to go somewhere else. And they've been trying for, what is it now, 25, 30 years, to make water flow uphill by forcing people to go somewhere it makes no sense to go, rather than go to the A&E that they know and they respect and they've got confidence in. And this is still going on now. Now, I say, if they've got those figures so seriously wrong, and they've got to revisit the plans, they should start here, right? Start with Ealing, start with Charing Cross, this whole nonsense of the shaping a healthier future, start with that. Let's come back and let's revisit it. And I'll tell you what, let's revisit the assumptions that were written into these plans by these management consultants who've been paid tens of millions of pounds to roll out nonsense, useless plans. Let's go and demand a refund from McKinsey and PricewaterhouseCoopers and all these other people, because they've been squandering money we could be spending on frontline patient care, and they've been advocating plans that undermined our local services rather than built them up. It's a scandal that these people are still now drawing down money to actually draw up plans that, you know, no self-respecting academic would sign off on. You know, just ridiculous, just ridiculous. McKinsey, you know, the classic management consultancy. You know, you bring in a management consultant, you ask him the time, he borrows your watch, tells you the time, charges you £1,000. But McKinsey borrow your watch and tell you the time wrong and charge you £1,000. So I'll tell you what, we need to revisit this. And another thing from NHS England, right? And again, a few days ago, they've scrapped the plan for a community health services forward view. Now, this was going to be the great master plan that was going to underpin all these hospital reconfigurations. Because people won't need hospitals because there's going to be all these splendid services out in the community. And even now, NHS England has been forced to admit they haven't got the money, they haven't got the resources, nobody's got any serious plans. All they've got is plans for closures. They have no plans at all for the community services that are needed if they're going to actually genuinely replace any hospital care. And one of the reasons for that is because it's actually not cheaper to deliver care in the community. If you deliver it properly, it's actually more expensive. It might actually, in some cases, be better for patients, but it's more expensive. So there's no way they're going to do it. So all you get is the cuts. What you don't get is the new services to take their place. And that's what we're facing in North West London, and that's what we're facing elsewhere around the country. And that's why people turned out on February the 3rd for the big demonstration we had in London and for protests up and down the country. We had 60,000 marched in London at 3 weeks' notice. We called it a short notice to respond to the developing crisis that was around us. We were intending to go a month later, and we brought it forward because we thought it was urgent to really make a point. Okay, 60,000, it made an impact around the world. We had Donald Trump. Right? Donald Trump. Well, because actually, this is quite interesting. It must have been on Fox News, right? The rabid right. They must have reported our demonstration because Donald Trump doesn't look at any proper news, right? Doesn't read anything. He actually just listens to and watches the TV and tweets. That's basically all he does. And he tweeted saying it was 60,000 people marching in protest that the NHS was rubbish, right? Well, he couldn't have got it further wrong, could he? But the reality is, we made an impact right around the world. We had appeals for photographs for the demonstration from Japan, right? They were covering it all over the world. Where weren't they covering it? On the BBC.
Yes.
But the point I'm making is 55 other places around England had demonstrations that day. Small, big, some of them varying sizes, but 55 other places, right across England and into Scotland, and into Belfast and Enniskillen in Northern Ireland, and into Wales as well. The first UK demonstration in favour of the NHS and the principles of the NHS and proper funding for our NHS that we've had for a long, long time. So I think this is really important, right? Because the reality is that although they put out various proposals, they put out various ideas, they don't really believe them themselves, and actually people don't believe them. The reality is everybody knows this government can find money when it wants to spend it, and it's decided not to spend it on the NHS. They can find money when they want to build HS2, which will benefit handfuls of wealthy business people trekking up and down to Birmingham. Why on earth anybody wants to trek up and down to Birmingham, I'm not quite sure. Well, I come from I live in the Midlands now, but I still don't know why anybody wants to go to Birmingham. And actually, it won't benefit anybody in between either. So it's a really interesting idea. But bottomless pit of money for that. Bottomless pit of money for all kinds of other enterprises they want to promote, but actually not the extra money that's needed for the NHS. Now, this is scandalous. And money for a bailout for East Coast Main Line. East Coast Main Line, privatised, it was making money as a nationalised industry, privatised, starts losing money, and hundreds of millions of pounds suddenly available to bail it out and keep Richard Branson in the star to which he wants to become accustomed. So we've got a government that is driving forward reactionary policies on all fronts, undermining the NHS on all fronts, undermining our welfare system with a tax on welfare, undermining all aspects of the NHS, not just the hospital services. Let's remember the mental health services are in desperate plight, absolutely desperate plight. Let's look at the GP services, which are struggling to cope with the tide of demand that they've got and the problems recruiting. Let's look at the problems holding the staffing together in hospitals, the 40,000 nursing vacancies, 100,000 vacancies all around in the NHS. It's amazing we've still got an NHS at all. We're going into a 70th year which we're going to celebrate with a celebration and a protest on June the 30th in London. We hope you're all going to join us on that day. Yeah. We're going to have a march and we're going to have some entertainment and some music and stuff, and we're going to make it a really good event. June the 30th, the 70th anniversary of the NHS. Because I'll tell you what, they've done what they can to hack it apart. They've done what they can to privatise it. They've done what they can to squeeze it down in terms of funding. But we still have an NHS which is absolutely basic to all of us. That's why you're all here tonight, because there's something to defend. And we've got a lot to defend. And we've got a lot to lose if we lose what we got. So that's why we're fighting here. We want to keep it together. We want to keep it all in one piece. And we want it publicly funded, publicly provided, and publicly delivered. And we want the whole thing to be one which is accountable to local people and not given to the hands of McKinsey and of course, the clinical commissioning groups and these other characters who don't regard themselves as accountable at all. Which comes to one other point. The government's got another big scheme. They call it accountable care organisations. It's a misnomer. Yes, we're finished, yeah? It's a misnomer, okay? But in every respect, they're unaccountable to local people, they don't care, and they're not very well organised, okay? They call them accountable care organisations. But actually, the reality is that as a result of campaigning work over the last year, smoking them out, putting the pressure on, people have become aware that this is happening. And people have become aware, and Tory MPs have begun realising even their own supporters don't like the idea. And so we even had Sarah Wollaston, Tory chair of the Health Committee in the House of Commons, writing to Jeremy Hunt saying, can you postpone this while we talk about it a bit in Parliament? And Jeremy Hunt having to postpone not only the implementation of it, but actually conduct a consultation on it, which is going to allow even more of us to smoke out what's going on right across the country. Okay? It's going to get pushed back. They've even had to rename it now. They now rename them integrated care organisations. They're in retreat, okay? They're in retreat because what they've been doing to our NHS has been found out. People don't like it. People are willing to get up and fight about it. Up and down the country where people are getting up and fighting, hospitals are being defended. Hospitals in Essex are being defended. Hospitals in Devon are being defended. Up and down the country, they're retreating from plans, just like the one we've got here. You've already got them knowing that they have a massive problem to deal with in terms of the local population. Let's keep on until we win. Let's make sure we beat these people. And I'll tell you what, the best answer of all would be to get another government in, a government that's prepared to actually fund our NHS. I know who I'd rather have running our NHS rather than this lot of shysters. Let's go on until we win. Let's keep our NHS and let's keep it public.
Thank you, John. As inspiring and entertaining as usual, and I think a lot of people were very happy with what you were saying. As John said, what holds our NHS together is its staff. And the next speaker has been holding things together for years on the front line, and we're eternally grateful that he is here on our platform, and he is a fantastic consultant, loved by his patients who he couldn't do enough for. So let's have a big hand for one of our wonderful frontline hospital consultants, Dr. Gurjinder Sandhu, or as we call him, Gurj.
Thanks very much for that, Eve. Now, just as John said, just as the sun came up this morning, winter came around this year. Influenza, colds, pneumonias, falls, it was all expected. They told you that we were better prepared than ever before. That's not how it felt in the hospitals. I'm used to going home in winter and seeing 7 or 8 ambulances parked outside Ealing Hospital. This winter, I came in the morning and I would find 7 or 8 ambulances parked outside Ealing Hospital. I'd walk through the hospital and I would see a look in the eyes of the nurse in charge. Your wife, Chris, inevitably. And that look was devastating to see in an experienced nurse's eyes. That look said, I am exhausted. That look said, I don't know how I survived this night. That look said, I can't keep doing this. And all you could do was give her a hug, tell her she'd done her best, tell her she'd done me proud, and try to get her home. But sadly, I know that that nurse would go home, despite all of her efforts that night, and feel that she hadn't done her best because of circumstances that were not under her control. So I would go on to that shift that day, and we would still have the ambulances lined upstairs. There would not be a horizontal space in the hospital for us to examine a patient in the emergency department. You would start a run around the hospital trying to get patients out of the hospital so you could get more patients in. You will start identifying the sickest patients in that emergency department and ensuring that they are safe. You will be in situations in the resuscitation department where you may need to intubate and ventilate a patient without having an ITU bed to send that patient to, and keep a doctor and a nurse by that patient's side to keep them safe. Do not get me wrong, we will keep you safe, no matter what they do. But please, let those staff not go home and feel that they've done something wrong. Those staff are working their damnedest to make sure that the hospital and the patients are kept safe. I'm proud of those nurses, but I'm also proud of the junior doctors. You will hear from Aislinn a little bit later on. When I was a junior doctor, we only had to look after the patient. Now, junior doctors find themselves in a situation where they are battling with the government, they are battling with the health secretary, they are battling with the politics of everything, and they are still looking after the patients with love and compassion. And at such a young age, to have that burden on your shoulders and to take on that fight is truly admirable. And those junior doctors keep the hospitals safe 24/7. We have a 7-day working hospitals around the country with people who are putting blood, sweat and tears. And do you know what? They're doing it with, despite all the circumstances, with a smile on their face. They are doing it and keeping rapport with those patients. They are doing it and uplifting the spirits of those patients, despite their own morale and spirits being in their boots. Quite frequently, it is the elderly and the frail patients over winter that give us our greatest challenges. I have been a physician for 18 years, and for 8 of them I have been a consultant. And I will say that elderly care medicine is the hardest medicine to practice. And it is shocking that people are trying to create the illusion that elderly patients can quite simply be looked after in their own homes and do not need hospital facilities, do not need accident and emergency departments. Let me give an example. A passerby walks by an elderly man who's in the rain during the day, and he looks a little lost. And the passerby asks what's going on. He goes, "No, I'm fine. I'm just making my way home, don't worry." 5 hours later, they pass by again and find the same elderly gentleman in the same place, still looking lost in the rain. And that kind stranger calls an ambulance because they really know that this gentleman is confused and they do not know what's going on where they live, and they cannot leave this man in the rain anymore. This gentleman will be brought into the accident and emergency department, and that team of nurses and doctors will begin the detective work. We've got 4 hours to do it. We're going to get him out in 4 hours? No, we're not. We're not going to get him back out. We've got to keep him in hospital. We've got to do investigations. We've got to do scans. We've got to look for infections. We need to establish whether this gentleman has dementia. We need to establish who this gentleman is. We need to find people. That admission becomes a 3-day admission, a 4-day admission, a 5-day admission. As we start building information up, we start thinking about, is it safe for him to go home? And that's where another group of staff come in that are really undervalued in the NHS, and that is our therapy staff, our physiotherapists, our occupational therapists, and our social workers as well. Because let us not forget that we are not just practicing medicine in an emergency care crisis, we are practicing medicine in a social care crisis.
True.
With time, our therapists will have established who he is, who the neighbours are, who the next of kin is, who is the GP. They will have put in pendants, they will have put in alarms, they will have put in a safety net. Not only are people keeping you safe in an emergency department, they are trying their damnedest to keep you safe when you leave hospital. Do not underestimate what these staff do. And what's sad, and I think I will speak more for Ealing Hospital, is what is sad is that this staff group is being told that they are not needed. They are not needed. We do not need an Ealing Hospital. We do not need a Charing Cross Hospital. All of these patients will be looked after in the community. These staff have been working under an axe placed over their heads since 2012. An axe that has come down and cut off our paediatric department, an axe that has come down and cut off our maternity department, an axe that has meant we have watched our friends and colleagues leave because they have not felt that they could continue to watch services being destroyed in a hospital that they have spent their working careers building up. We are now in a situation where even our admin staff are being told that their grades will be downgraded, their jobs will be downgraded. And talking to one of those admin staff, it becomes very clear the word she used to describe that situation was humiliation. When you have given your all to a career, when you have given your all to a profession, and somebody tells you you're not needed, when you know you are doing work where you are needed. The irony during all of this is, when we look at ambulance redirections in London, Ealing Hospital, month after month after month, has more ambulances redirected to it than any other hospital in London. How do you tell that staff that they are not needed? Let's look at a little more details of these plans. John mentioned earlier on NHS improvement, and suddenly people starting to say, well, do you know what, maybe we need to look at our accident and emergency activity a little bit more. McKinsey's and all of those fancy management consultants took their millions over the years, and it is millions. We have looked into it. I think it works out to be approximately 88 million. They took millions over the years, and they tried to say, well, let's see what will happen if we cut out Ealing Hospital. What would we need to do it? Well, we would need to reduce the number of admissions by about 30-40%, and we actually think, looking at our numbers, that we've got 1,000 extra beds in northwest London that we don't need. So in that time period, what has happened? Every winter in northwest London, we've had to open an extra 200 beds to keep things going. And steadily, the trend of beds in northwest London has been going upwards. The number of admissions in northwest London has been going upwards. You close 2 emergency departments, you take 2 assessment areas out, you put pressure on the surrounding hospitals, and one by one, like a domino effect, first you see Northwick Park's A&E performance deteriorate, next you see Hillingdon's A&E performance deteriorate, next you see Ealing's A&E performance deteriorate. You see performance deteriorating in outer West London, and yet people still say, that's the hospital we think we can close. The one where more ambulances are redirected than anywhere else. You can probably guess, I like numbers, I like graphs. I like graphs because they speak the truth. Graphs are evidence. Now there's one graph that really makes me panic, and that was when the Dow Jones crashes. Now, I probably don't fit the profile of someone that has lots of stocks and shares, so why do I panic when the Dow Jones crashes? Well, in 2008 we had a financial crisis, and after that we have had top-down reconfigurations in health like you could never imagine. CCGs, Health and Social Care Act, STPs, accountable care organisations, constantly trying to change things because we cannot afford to look after our elderly. That is the message that this government is sending out. An elderly population that has given more in taxes than anyone else to this National Health Service deserves to have this National Health Service look after them when they need it the most. With accountable care organisations, I used to think we're talking about robbing Peter to pay Paul. But actually, we're robbing Peter and we're robbing Paul and we're paying Richard. That would be Branson. We're robbing Peter and we're robbing Paul and we're paying Donald. That would be Trump. This is a way in which the private sector will come along and, as John says, these shysters will try their best to make sure that the NHS is financially bankrupt. But we will ensure that nobody ever allows the NHS to be morally bankrupt. We... Where there is injustice in the magnitude that we experience, there is never the possibility of walking away from a fight. And that is why I am so proud that you guys continue to fill halls, continue to leave these events standing room only. Thank you very much for all your support. It means so much to the staff of the hospital.
This is what our NHS is about, isn't it? It's why we love it and why we want to defend it. Gurj, you are amazing, absolutely amazing. There's just one point I forgot to make. When Gurj was talking about the shysters and the privatisation, and John was talking about the local NHS bosses that never seem to learn, what they want to do, which I haven't said, is they want to take all our community health services, you name it, audiology, children's health, elderly services, parcel it up into a nice, enormous 1 billion 10-year contract and find somebody possibly like Virgin Care to take it over and run it. And that would be an absolute disaster, which is why not just us campaigning around Ealing Hospital, but we need to stop this and stop the contract. And if they don't get a private provider, then they'll try and get another NHS trust, because they love to have all the different NHS fighting with each other to do it instead. So just to be clear, that's the kinds of things, off-the-wall ideas that they're trying to do in this hospital, as well as the hideous cuts. So my next speaker, I'm very pleased to introduce one of our local MPs. We're in an area where our local MPs are all opposed to the cuts that are taking place at Ealing Hospital and at Charing Cross. So I think you all know who she is, but she's Rupa, one of our local MPs. So a big hand for Rupa.
Thanks, Eve. Thanks ever so much. And look, I'll stand up so you can see me. You probably still can't see me, can you? But look, actually, the more I see from here, there's loads of people in this room that I know. More and more people I notice that I know. So I think I can be honest tonight. And we've got a lot of our councillors here, Hitesh, Aisha, people who sort of have the hard job of running it all from the local government end, and Dr. Onka Sahota. And it was great to hear from Gurj and John. Of course, I'm not a medical doctor, but I am a lifelong Ilonian. And I am an end user of these NHS services, both as a parent and as someone who's lost both of my parents in Ealing Hospital. I remember Ealing Hospital going up in 1979. There was such a lot of optimism attached to it, brand new building in 1979. And, you know, what they have done to it. And those lying leaflets, when they come through the door and they say Ealing Hospital is not closing, just look around you. Look at the luxury flats that are going up in the grounds. Yep. You know, I've seen the STP, along with the other two, our other two MPs, Steve Pound and Virendra Sharma, as MPs. We're privy to these documents. And John mentioned shaping a healthier future. That was shafting a healthier future. We know what that was. And now we have these STPs, the Sustainable Transformation Plans. You know, London is heading for a population of 10 million. It is not sustainable what they're doing. It certainly will be transformational. So, this government is hell-bent on its own ideology. If you look at that Andrew Lansley Health and Social Care Act, in some ways the NHS has ceased to exist as it was envisaged because it's become just another provider, not even the preferred provider anymore. What they're doing is really dangerous. And I ask this, it's basically privatisation by stealth. And it's this horrible type of Americanisation, and all this has happened in the climate of post-Brexit. Remember the £350 million a week we were meant to get for the NHS on the side of the bus, complete, their knickers were on fire. They've told us a heck of a lot of porkies, these Tories. The list could go on and on and on. And the other day I asked a question in the House of Commons about, the A-level history syllabus. Kids who do modern British history, suddenly the time frame of that has gone from being the 20th century to being 1951 to 1997. Isn't that a bit suspect? Wipes out the whole of the Attlee legacy. And I'm glad John mentioned that it was a Labour creation and we want a Labour government back again. Because all that has gone. Even the 1944 Butler Education Act, the NHS, we're approaching the 70th birthday of the NHS. We should be wishing it a happy birthday, giving it the bumps, whatever. But instead, what do we have? Another winter crisis. Something that we've now sort of learned to live with as inevitable. It doesn't have to be this way. And, you hear these stories, people like, what's his name, Harry Patch, is he? The guy who talks about how he was born after the NHS, his sister's, Harry's last stand. Harry Leslie Smith, that's the dude, yeah. Okay, so he talks about stories of the workhouse. Things were how things were before we had an NHS free at the point of demand. People used to have to choose between sickness and having a roof over your head, those kind of choices. And we've had an NHS for 70 years. And when we come back into government, we will put the NHS at the heart of our policies again. And we will have an immediate moratorium on all of these closures and these sustainability and transformation plans. Remember, it was in 2013 when the A&Es were lost at both Hammersmith and at Central Middlesex. And already, I do a weekly surgery every Friday. I see the effects that that's had on my constituents, the fact that they have to travel. Certainly Central Middlesex was a brand new one. And to replace that with, as Gurj said, with Northwick Park, which requires improvement from its last CCG. I think the one in CQC, the Quality Care Commission report. So it requires improvement in pretty much every area. And the one in 2013 was even more of a stinker. So they cut a good one and they replace it with a failing one. No one mentioned so far the Choosing Wisely campaign. I think that's that. And again, it's another example of this horrible Americanisation that we now have a Prime Minister who's so desperate to go for these trade deals, so desperate to, she's holding hands with Trump. She should be holding him to account, not holding his hand. And she's so desperate to suck up to him for these trade deals that we've humiliated ourselves in front of the world, scraping around for these bits. And this Choosing Wisely thing is meant to be, it's basically another Americanisation. It's starving the NHS of funds, our greatest national institution. And local government is worth mentioning. Local government, this government is very clever at displacing all of its cuts onto your Labour council, so that's who gets blamed. I think 60% of the budget since 2010 has gone, so they're doing a very difficult conjuring act. Everyone is trying to do more and more with less and less. All these things are sort of joined up, because if there's less funding for parks are somewhere that people need for health benefits and all those sort of things. All these things are joined up. John mentioned the so-called accountable care organisations. To me, that reminds me of, those countries that are called Democratic Republic of. When it's called that, it means it isn't. So something called accountable, it by golly isn't. So the Health Select Committee, all these people have heaped opprobrium on that. Patients, campaign groups, and as John pointed out, a humiliating climb down on the 25th of January. They had to admit, really, failure. They've got this bogus consultation now for 12 weeks, so the thing has been paused. But it's their own admission of failure that it's so secretive. In fact, the early day motion that Labour tabled in the House of Commons, even DUP MPs were signing that. The DUP who's propping them up. I mean, they're just a joke, this government. They had a general election where they thought they could destroy me, and I'm still here. But they had an election purely to gain more power, and they lost their majority. They're now propped up by the DUP. Even DUP MPs realise what a shambles this accountable care organisation plan is. It's not at all transparent, and again, it's the model used, guess where? The United States. So it's another import from over the pond and, you know, we have, it was mentioned, a president who's determined to slander our healthcare system, and he wants to see it, they want to see it parcelled off, sold off to multinational corporations. You know, even the BMA, so I'm not talking the SWP, but the British Medical Association, the BMA, has said that the government needs to clarify what safeguards will be in place to ensure that ACOs do not enable any increase in the role of independent sector providers in Ealing. Oh, 1 minute, really? Okay. What else has not been said? I mean, it's been mentioned the whole Carillion disaster there, sort of a blind reliance on these private companies. We've seen it again with the rail franchisers, Govia as well as East Coast. Group 4 we saw before when they tried to run our prisons. You know, it's this ideology before logic that this government is hell-bent on. And so, I mean, stuff we've said we'll do, we will lift the 1% pay cap, because again, that's demoralising. My mother actually passed during the election, 21st of May, 2 weeks before polling day. So I went to that hospital every day from the 29th of March when she went in. And the morale, when the threat of the axe is over the staff at Ealing Hospital, you know, that sort of feeds into everything. All the other stuff they've done, they removed the nurse bursaries, so the training grants for nurses, the junior doctors' contracts we've talked about. The government's own equality impact assessment found that it discriminates against women who have children or want to do caring or for their own parents or whatever. So, I mean, their own government said that was wrong, but they plough on regardless. They're just arrogant. And my colleagues who were there in the 1992 to 97 major government say it's a bit like that. Everything's collapsing around their ears. So let's hope this happens. So I started with, and we're very lucky to have Labour councils in Ealing and Hammersmith and Fulham who wouldn't sign up to that STP. So that's very courageous of our leaders to do that. So, I mean, I started with Bevan with what they've done with the A-level history curriculum. He said, didn't he, that the NHS will exist as long as there are folk there with the fight to keep it. So we've got to, you know, the fact that this campaign started in 2013, we still have A&E at Ealing and Charing Cross. I mean, I know what they're planning to do. Eve was saying, when is a hospital not a hospital? 500 beds will be lost. Those things will be glorified old people's homes. If you can't go there in an ambulance, you know, we've seen all the departments of Ealing disappear bit by bit. When I was first an MP, there was maternity. It's got the third highest birth rate out of 33 London boroughs. Maternity's gone, paediatric, it's disappearing before our eyes, but we won't let that happen. We can totally do this. The fact that they're still there is because of the success of this campaign. So let's do this, people. Thank you.
And I was going to say that it's good to see some councillors here tonight, and as I said earlier on, our council has been Wage Unify under the Save Our Hospitals banner. I hope everybody has signed the petition. If you haven't done so, please do it. It's supposed to finish today, so please sign that petition if you haven't already done that. And if you'd like to go to another NHS meeting, then the council's got a meeting in the Dominion Centre 2 days' time on Thursday night at 7:30, and you might have to hear me again because they've asked me to come and speak, but this time I'll be a speaker, not a chair, which is much nicer in some ways. So do get along, and you probably, hopefully, it's a bigger room with more seats, so hopefully people won't have to stand up. So it's great that the council's doing that meeting, as indeed is Hammersmith on the 28th of February, I think also at 7:30 in Hammersmith Town Hall. So our last speaker gives me great pleasure is Dr. Aislinn Macklin Doherty, who's going to finish our meeting. Thank you very much. No, not finish the meeting, she's the last speaker.
Don't go after me. Thank you very much. I always feel somewhat underqualified when I'm in the presence of such eminent speakers, but I'm here because I love the NHS and I love my job and I love patients and I wouldn't want to do anything else. And most of all, I love my job because of the NHS. The NHS allows me as a clinician to have the freedom to look after patients according to what they clinically need, not how much their life is worth according to an insurance company. That is an incredible, quite a unique freedom in the UK, and every doctor feels that privilege in the NHS. But what's happening, and what has been happening in the last 20 to 25 years, has been a slow erosion of the underlying principles of the NHS, of the comprehensive delivery of care, of the universality of care, and of it being free at the point of use. And as many of the speakers here have highlighted, this is entirely ideological. Not only is it not evidence-based, it actually goes against all of the evidence. The system that we have, a general taxation-funded NHS, is the most efficient and the most effective way to deliver for the needs of the entire population. So what the current government and previous governments have done are moving us away against what is efficient and what is effective. So it is entirely ideologically driven. And what I'd like to share with you is the human cost of that and what I see on the front line. And I think a lot of the things that have been described, particularly by Gurj, about what is happening to the NHS can be divided into two main processes. Suffocation of funds, but also the breakup and marketisation, the privatisation of the NHS. And sometimes this is billed as secondary, but is absolutely critical to undermining the principles of the NHS. So the suffocation of funds, I think Gurj has quite brilliantly highlighted what the human costs are. But when you have some of the lowest numbers of beds in the entirety of Western Europe for the population, yet we're the fifth richest economy in the world, what it means is I have to take the calls from patients with cancer who have had treatments, who have infections, who can't breathe, who are in pain, and I'm the one that has to say, I'm sorry, we can't admit you here. I'm the one that has to listen to the pain, to the distress, to the fear, as they're redirected from pillar to post. When I come into work, and there should be 3 or 4 doctors looking after the patients on the wards, and there's only 1 or 2 of us, the remaining doctors have to take on the workload of the others, and we're told it is our duty to provide patient care. Of course it is. But you can only do so much. When you take on double or triple the number of patients in the same amount of time, these are people. These are our relatives. These are our loved ones. They all have scans. They all have blood results. They all have stories. They all have investigations. They all have their own fears, dreams, hopes that you have to know, you have to understand as a doctor. If you're doing that in the same amount of time, the quality of care that I can provide plummets. So I'm handcuffed to the system and the conditions within which I am working. So those are examples of the suffocation of funds, resources, staffing. Let me give you some examples of what privatisation does, because it's often harder to explain what that means. One example, a hospital I worked in had elective in-house transport. So transport organised by the NHS to take NHS patients to and from their appointments. It then got sold to G4S, the incompetent company that totally messed up the Olympics. As soon as they took over the services, I noticed many more patients were late to appointments or even couldn't even make appointments. They would come into clinic with life-threatening terminal illnesses in tears because their elective ambulance driver hadn't arrived and they were so scared they wouldn't come to their appointments. I was faced with reams of forms that I had to fill in because G4S had decided they wanted to reduce the number of patients they would provide these services to. Privatisation is about cutting costs to maximise profits, and the cost is human. Another example of privatisation, I work in oncology. Increasingly, with the budget cuts, there is a move towards introducing top-up fees, co-payments, co-pays they're called in America. This is now a reality in the UK for the first time that I'm aware of. Ever-increasing developments in oncology mean there are ever-increasingly expensive drugs. The NHS now can't afford to provide them for everyone. So we now, as clinicians, are in the situation where we can be having a conversation with a young mother, 2 children, no job, and asking whether or not she can afford £120,000 for a 1 in 4 chance that she could live a few months extra. What kind of system have we allowed to be created? This is not the USA, this is happening now in the UK. But I don't want to be too, negative. There is a lot of anger out there. There's a lot of disillusionment amongst NHS staff, but there's also a hell of a lot of camaraderie. I saw that during the junior doctors' strike, because when you erode people's conditions, when you erode their morale, they will only take so much, as Gurj has said, and then there becomes a tipping point, and that crack happened 2 years ago now. You do not get 50,000 largely conservative, probably conservative voting, the majority of them, out on the streets, defending their working terms and conditions, defending their patients, making the hardest decision that any of us had ever made to get out on the streets without there being a serious crisis. That politicised a lot of junior doctors. It made them aware of what is happening around them. And most importantly, it linked them up with people in the community. And that's the key. That's where the real strength lies. So 2 years ago, I came to a public meeting. 2 years ago, I was, I'd say, an armchair warrior. You know, watching Newsnight, throwing things at it, turning it off, talking about the bias. And I came to a meeting and I heard a panel quite similar to this. John Lister was in fact speaking at the time. And I thought, wow, that's spot on. I totally agree with that. And I want to do something about it. And I came up and I said, what can I do? I'm here, I'm ready. This is called Health Campaigns Together now. We are a group of volunteers doing this in our own free time, people who have got passion, who are motivated, who have initiative, who have imagination. And last year, we put on a demonstration where 250,000 people got out there into the streets. This year, it was 60,000 in 3 weeks. During the general election, we put on the National NHS Roadshow. We created a video that was viewed 13 million times. We are credited in a book written about the election as being one of the most influential campaigns. We were the 3rd most used Twitter account. These things have a real impact. One of the proudest things that I have ever read about what I have done is that I was a thorn in the side of Tory HQ during that generation. So I want to leave with a message of hope and of fight. When I struggle, which I often do, to cope with the things that I'm seeing around me, when I feel powerless, often, I think of three key things. Number one, what is it that I believe in, and can I justify what I believe in? Number two, is what I believe in the interests of the majority, for the good of the majority? And number three, how can I fight with as many other people to make that happen? And I think if you believe in something like the NHS, this is the absolute epitome of all of those things. It is for the greatest good. It is for the collective public interest. It came out of the devastation of the Second World War in times of real austerity. It can be achieved, and the only way to achieve it is to do what every single one of you are doing here tonight, is getting out, getting active, getting together, and then we'll get it back. Thank you.
So can we have a big hand for all four of our speakers, because I think they've all been brilliant. But the meeting's not over, because we've got about half an hour for you, because at the end of the day, every one of us makes a huge difference. And as we've heard, every one of us gives enormous support to Aislinn and Gurj, who are fighting inside. Without the campaigns in the community, we're giving them, I hope, the courage. They give us the courage to fight, and I hope we give you the courage to stand firm and to fight and keep on doing that. And I say that on behalf of Ealing Save Our NHS, on behalf of the lovely people in Hammersmith, from Save Our Hospitals, and of course our two councils and their campaigning too. And I see we've been joined by Julian Bell as well, so nice to see you, Julian. I just want to say a couple of quick things, and then we will open up for a discussion, which is that campaigns are about the people that are involved. And we have a lovely group of people who are actively involved in Ealing Save Our NHS. Some of them are getting on a bit, which probably has something to do with how much as we get older, we need the NHS, because we're there a hell of a lot. And we do a lot in our campaign, and over there is at the very back, I hope you all will have seen these yellow posters. We'd like to see them in nearly every house around the borough. We also have, preferably for a tiny donation, we have some lovely Save Ealing Hospital stickers, which you can get at the back there. And on your seats, if I haven't already pestered you endlessly with our newsletters, I hope all of you who are on email sign up for our newsletter. We do regular updates to let you know what everybody's doing, what we're doing, how you can help, and actually what's going on locally in terms of what's happening with our NHS. So if you don't already get the emails, there's one of these on your desk. You can fill it in on your desk, on your chair. You can either fill it in now or go on our Ealing Save Our NHS website, which is on here, and sign up for the newsletter. There are so many things you can do. Facebook, Twitter, help us give out leaflets. Come and stand in the freezing cold and the sunshine on street stalls. Join us on protests. And if you want to, we also had a fabulous group of people who have been hard at work over the months and over the years, researching, following all these people around and analysing all of their statistics and showing how wrong they are. So there's many ways that people can help. And I'm looking for Arthur, but I can't see Arthur. Oh, Arthur's here. So could somebody lock the doors, please? Nobody's to escape.
Good evening. My name's Arthur Brins, and I happen to be the treasurer. Now, we've got some buckets going around.
No, you haven't yet.
Well, they will be going around very shortly. We're a very small organisation. David and Goliath, to pick out a phrase from the Bible, doesn't describe us at all. More like a herd of elephants and one tiny mosquito. Their funds are enormous, and we've tried our hardest to extend our funds, but we could do with your help tonight. But before I ask for your help, I ought to say there's been 2 phone calls. Andrew Marr wants these 4 people on Sunday, if you could turn up. Because they've been such excellent speakers. But I have to say, Graham Norton phoned up wanting you as an audience because you were brilliant. So give yourself a round of applause. Now, the collections are coming round, and it would be really helpful if you produced paper collections, because that makes it easier for a numbskull like me to tot it all up and take it to our bank, who charge nothing. But if you've left your chequebook at home, please come to me, because I've got my name and address on a card, and you can send that through the post. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to invite people for, we've got about 25 minutes, so I'm going to see if anybody's got any questions or wants to make a very brief point. I'm going to have to ask everybody to be very quick. So, I've seen a few hands. I'll take this young lady here first. John, come on. Paper's quieter than coins.
Hi, my name's Linda. I'm here on behalf of the Power Group. I'd like to say a big thank you to all of the NHS staff who really help us all out, and you really you work so hard day in, day out for all of us to keep our NHS safe. And also a big thank you to all of the councillors and everyone who's attended this public meeting tonight. It's been very much appreciated, and to fight to keep our NHS going.
I think, the roving mic is now working.
Oh, it's working.
Yeah, it just needs a bit of balance. Can I see, I saw somebody, anyone else? Everyone's gone really quiet. They're probably going to go home. Oh, no, very, very brief.
You've helped us enormously. What I'd like to ask is, since the ex-chief executive of Imperial has moved to be the chief executive of NHS Improvement and has said that he thinks some kind of adjustment is needed to the A&E figures, is this a hint that he's going to put pressure on behalf of accident and emergency departments in saying they're doing a valuable job, or is this another political smokescreen now that he's in the hot seat, presumably being subject to huge pressure from the government to come up with the right, in inverted commas, answers? I'd love thoughts from the panel. Thank you.
Good. Raj, sorry. See if I don't know if it's working. You'll try. Try and use this. Sorry about the spoke. The mic. It was working earlier, but it's not. It's short. Please. Go on then.
Comrades, fantastic meet tonight and fantastic turnout. But what I would like to say, in terms of what this government has promised us during the elections, when we had the referendum on Remain or Brexit, and the 200 million they promised and not being delivered, and also the fact that doctors from overseas are being denied entry into the country, either on a temporary basis or permanent basis, to take up their positions in hospital and GPs, which is which is something this government should not be doing. We should be supporting the NHS, and if there's a lack of medical staff, we should be getting them where and wherever we can, because people need medical assistance. The crisis in the NHS shows us that we must step up our campaign to get rid of this bloody government. That's the only way we're going to win.
Right, I'm going to take this... You've forgotten what you want to say. Right, I'm going to take this gentleman here. I'm so sorry about the mic. If you're leaving, please make sure you please try and make a donation, and don't forget to take our details.
First of all, I have to thank the panel who are taking time to come and see us and talk to us. We thank you very much. A big hand for them, please. Now, the question I have for those people there, there is no answer because I don't want an answer. Only a little observation. You all mentioned about the National Health Service, but one thing they haven't mentioned, and I hope the next time you are having a meeting, do mention it. We have big boys who are leaking the money out of us, like executives, like presidents, and so on. The next time, please mention and start to fight those people. I thank you very much.
Before I take the next person, I just want to say something about what's happening on Saturday. This Saturday there is a big event, a national day of action that's called One Day Without Us. It can't have escaped people's notice that there's been some really horrible stuff said about migrants. A failure to recognise absolutely our media has stoked up some really horrible racism, and that's had a big impact inside our NHS, where some of our staff, particularly those from the EU, have felt that they're not welcome here, and some of them have been leaving and going back to their countries and leaving our NHS. And our NHS is totally dependent on fantastic staff from all around the world, and I think this is absolutely atrocious. So there is a day of action this Saturday. It's called One Day Without Us. There is a rally outside this town hall between 11:30 and 12:30. It's organised by West London Unite Community, and that's Raj that was just here, and others. In Southall, we have got a little rally, but also we're getting people together to record the voices of migrant people and communities in Southall, and that's 11 o'clock at Southall Town Hall, and at 1:30 to 3 o'clock in Parliament Square there's going to be a big rally with lots of speakers and I think some entertainment, so I hope people can come. If some of you can stay here to the end, we thought we'd like to make a contribution to that day from this meeting, and we're asking those of you who are happy to do so to come up the front, to hold up this, to say we're proud of our migrant NHS workers. So I hope some of you can come and join us just up the front here, and that photograph will go out with all the others on Saturday. So I really hope that you can do that. Ollie, where are you? Ollie's got a really loud voice. I don't know if he needs a microphone, but he might.
Oh, it's not working.
It's not working.
Just to say briefly that under their plans, which have not changed for years, Shaping a Healthier Future plans are basically as they were. Despite all of their public relations, this hospital is not going to close and all of that, their plans are still in place, and under their original plans, by now, Ealing Hospital would have been finished, gone, a few clinics, no operations. Thanks to you, thanks to the campaigning, thanks to the council, and thanks to their total incompetence, they haven't done it. And as John said at the beginning, they are on the back foot, they are on the retreat, and we are getting stronger. We've got a great campaign, and I hope everybody gets emails from us. If you don't get emails from us, please fill out one of the sheets of paper that you're sitting on, or one in the stall there. We have got a council standing up and campaigning. We've got lots of other different local organisations campaigning in different ways, not to mention the hospital staff and other health staff. So I think we are possibly seeing a turnaround. People say to us on the street, oh, you can't win and all of that stuff. We can win, and we are going to win, and this meeting here shows our determination. We're going to get bigger, we're going to get stronger, we're going to make it politically impossible, technically impossible, and humanly impossible. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming and for supporting Ealing Save Our NHS.
Is it you? Yeah. Yes. Up.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say, because I remember working at Central Middlesex Hospital, which was, when it was the old hospital, I used to go there and fix telephone lines. That was my job. And what a nice kind of, it was a bit run down, but what a nice place it was. And then all of a sudden, they said, no, we're going to regenerate that area. They knocked down the old hospital, and they've got this tremendous hospital, new hospital, which I think costs an awful lot of money. But what I want to know is this: what happened to all the money? Because they spent, when I say they spent a lot of money, because I remember the contractors there. Okay, so what happened to that money? Who got the money for developing that site? Where are they now? Is there any charges that should be put? That's what I think, They should be, I don't think if you want. Some should they be charged for?
Are there any other questions? If not, I'll ask our panel to very quickly answer those questions. And if you're leaving, don't forget to give us a donation. We need the money to keep on campaigning. I don't think there's anyone else. So,
question. Last question. Just wanted to ask the panel to give a comment. I know it was mentioned about possible outsourcing of some other services, including audiology and others, that may be coming up. And I do know a friend who lives in Oxfordshire, not in Oxford, but nearby, and she went to, because she had very bad earache following flu, she went to her GP practice and was told that audiology had been outsourced, that now she would need to apply to this private clinic for her ears to be syringed, and was given a card to do, to contact them, and she had to do this. She found they were shut over a whole period over Christmas, so although her earache was very bad, she couldn't go till the new year, and when she did, she had to make a £85 down payment each time, for having her ears syringed. So a whole raft of further services in Oxfordshire have obviously been outsourced to this private provider. So I just wanted the panel to comment. Thank you.
Right, if that's all right, I'm going to ask them to come back and then we can wrap up the meeting. Thank you.
I'll just take Una's question, actually. I don't trust the guy, and I think you're absolutely right not to trust him. But if the regulators are starting to question the numbers, then that is only a good thing. Because up until now, everybody has been blindly following these numbers and creating the illusion that this emperor is clothed, that this emperor is, as I've said once before, stark bollock naked, and stark bollock naked in a very cold winter as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Nice image. There's a lot of political theatre being played. A lot of it is very, very clear distraction tactics, and that leads quite nicely into the point, sorry, I don't know his name, the chap raised about migrants and vilifying migrants. Again, this is distraction techniques, so the complete malicious corruption and combined with incompetence is not revealed from the government's own hands, so they have to blame it on other people. The answer to the gentleman's question about the outsourcing and where has all the money gone, where does it always go? The banks, to the rich, to the very wealthiest. So it was a PFI deal, and we all know how successful they've been for the banks and for the shareholders of these big private companies. I think Bart's is another great example of that. One of the best hospitals in the country that is in special measures and failing, and it's shelling out 3 million a week, I think, so the wealthy can continue to get wealthier. So it's just the whole ideology of this government, and it needs to be challenged and it needs to be taken out. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So the question from Hammersmith on the Imperial Trust guy. I think Charing Cross actually has gone through 3 CEOs in the calendar year of 2017. So, I mean, again, to lose one might look careless, to lose 2, it's becoming a habit. 3, what's that turning into? You know, it's not good news. Yeah, more than a coincidence, isn't it? So, I think the guy is supposed to be honest and straight talking. I don't know him personally. The ones in Ealing I do know. Mahini Parmar has again cancelled a meeting she's meant to be having with me. I think that's since 2016. She keeps cancelling and cancelling. I mean, there's a long list of things. If people want to add to that, I'm supposed to have a private audience with her. I have not had it since 2015. And when I do meet her, she's a bit of a robot. I mean, she just says, it's clinician-led, it's clinician-led. But these aren't the sort of clinicians. Gurjinder and Aislinn, who are on their committee, it's their robotic ones, who've been paid the king's ransom, whatever, Yankee dollar, to say the Americanisation version of things. And again, we're told that we're in a period of austerity, and this is a government that has wasted how many billions on this unnecessary top-down reorganisation that's made it unwieldy. So they find money when they do want it to justify their own twisted, perverted ideas. And yeah, I totally agree with the thing about scapegoating migrant workers. I mean, they have run our public services, and that's, you know, how that referendum really, all the nasty posturing, we know it wasn't about the economic case for Brexit, for leaving the EU at all. It just turned into this reductivist thing to scapegoat migrants. I mean, do you remember that? Was it not a bus conductor, a West Indian bus conductor who got a job, but John Major didn't? I wish he'd not run away from the circus and become a banker at that moment. He should have just known his place when I love that woman, whoever she is. I don't know where she is now. Lots of people bandied around a lot of figures. £350 million was the one-off given as a sticking plaster for the NHS crisis. That was meant to be every week. We were supposed to get that for the NHS. PFI, I think, hang on, other people are going to deal with that. But yeah, I mean, it's a really bad idea. We've seen, and unfortunately it was the Brown-Blair government who also had a fondness for that at the time. So, you know, I'm in a different Labour Party now. We've admitted that was a mistake. But I think our official party policy is on a case-by-case basis. So if a hospital doesn't have laundry services, it might make sense to send it somewhere else. But for the audiology, for the stuff you were talking about, it sounds totally wrong. And just finally, Central Middlesex Hospital. I remember that place from 1990 when I was a hospital radio DJ there. And I learned how to push up and down a fader there. And there were certain things we were not allowed to play. I think My Way by Frank Sinatra is a bit gloomy if you analyse the lyrics. About the final curtain. Anyway, let's not be doom and gloom. The final curtain is drawn today.
Yeah, well, again, just run down the card of the questions. The former Chief Executive of Imperial, now working for the NHS regulator. Well, rather different from Mahini Palmer, Ian Dalton actually ran a hospital, right? Ran a service. Mahini Palmer is a GP who's running a commissioners and basically pass the problems on to the hospitals. So this is rather different. And if he's now saying that there's doubt over those figures, we should hold him to that. And we should say, come down, right, come down, formally in front of everybody here, tear up this bloody stupid plan that was drawn up on the basis of completely bogus figures, and let's have a full-scale start again. Tell the CCGs and tell the local trusts that they don't have to implement this and they should not implement it because it's irresponsible, and let's have a proper plan based on needs of local people. Simple. A friend over here raised the question of executive pay. I'll tell you what, a good executive who's prepared to stand up, speak truth to power and do something like that, intervene and turn things around, stand up for what is true, I think they're worth a lot of money. They're worth money. They deliver a quality service. The people who just, defer to management consultants, run around punting out stuff they know is untrue, putting up with things they know are untrue, not speaking up for local people, they're a waste of money, and we should be demanding that they replace with people who really care about the NHS. No? So let's not have it too much of a thing. Somebody who runs a big hospital takes it seriously and takes it and has a responsibility. I think they deserve a decent rate of pay. Why should they not be paid a decent rate of pay? But in exchange, we want them to stand up for us and for the local communities and the services they represent, and the other staff working in the hospital. And we don't expect them to make a huge, great gap between their salary scales and the people they're working for them day by day and actually deliver the services. So in other words, they should be campaigning with us to lift the cap on NHS and for more money for the NHS. On the Brexit promises, I think this is one of the most outrageous frauds we've ever faced, actually, as a country. They're wrecking the entire country on the basis of this drive for Brexit, taking control back. I'll tell you what, taking control back, it's 35,000 people from the EU, health professionals, keeping our NHS running, right? They're going to drive them away. Already we can see there's a collapse of recruitment from Europe. Right? 96% and more drops in applications of European health professionals we need to fill vacancies. And this is the legacy of this wretched Brexit vote. Right? Now, whatever we think about the European Union, and it's got plenty of faults, the reality is that all the things that are good about it is what they're against. They're not actually, and whipping up now an anti-migrant feeling. There was a thing on Twitter just recently. I was in my A&E recently, it was full of immigrants. One of them took my blood pressure, one of them gave me an injection, and the other one gave me a prescription to take home. But the reality is you cannot have an NHS in this country at the present time without migrants. We haven't built an NHS with migrants. We couldn't have built it without migrants. It's absolutely essential. And if we're not proud of anything else, we need to be proud of the fact our NHS has actually built itself on this tremendous multicultural basis. It's a great strength to us. We start undermining that, we start undermining the very basis of our society. So really important. One Day Without Us is an extremely important campaign. I'm really pleased that they're going with that. PFI, we are still paying for it year by year. We're paying for the full hospital while they shut it down bit by bit. And it carries on, it's a 30-year contract. They're still paying through the nose. And it was a first wave PFI, and they're still paying for these things. That was, they opened from 2000, so it'll be at least another 10 years we'll be paying, probably 12 of 13 years more payments to go. We've already paid for these hospitals. Exactly. Already paid for all of the PFI hospitals, okay? I was just doing the sums today. Currently, we've got £12.5 billion worth of hospitals have been built under PFI. We've already, since the PFI started, paid back £18 billion. And we've got another £62 billion to pay to make a total of over £80 billion for £12 billion worth of hospitals. This is an absolute fraud. And at the same time, you've got companies like Carillion that have been cashing in on that shamelessly and are now going bust. Just up the road from me in Birmingham, the place that nobody wants to go to, they've got a PFI hospital that's almost finished, a £300 million hospital, Midland Metropolitan Hospital, it's almost finished, and they were doing a thing outside because all the Carillion staff have not gone back because nobody's prepared to guarantee, pay them their back wages or guarantee they'll be paid for finishing the job. So in the interview, TV interviewer out there, 9 o'clock at night, the lights are on inside the hospital. It's a big, vast building. You know, window panes are missing, but the lights are on, but there's nobody at home, they're not building anything, and the reality is PFI is like that. The private sector milk the NHS for money, anything goes wrong with the private sector, they walk off and leave us with the problem, us with the bill. So rip off, it's a scam, and it's got to be stopped. It's a delight finally to have Labour admitting that was a big, big historic mistake. And we will be paying a lot of money for that, to put it right, but let's learn the lesson, let's make sure we don't do any more of that, and let's do what we can to get money back off the shysters who've stolen it from us. And just finally, let's remember, 70 years ago this year, 70 years ago, the Labour Party, Nye Bevan and the Labour Party drove through a historic reform. Absolutely historic reform. They swept away a wretched, collapsed, bankrupt market system in which you had private hospitals, charitable hospitals, municipal hospitals, mainly small buildings, not working with each other at all, and they built a system. They nationalised the network of hospitals and they built the basis of our NHS. And that meant not just you got payment treatment free of point of need, which was very important, not just it was funded from general taxation, which is extremely important, but it meant those hospitals could start working together, the staff could start working together. You could build teams, you could train doctors, you could train nurses, you could actually build a collaboration, you could develop new techniques, develop research, develop modern medicine, develop our NHS. That was what came out of that reform. A historic, massive stride forward in history. Right? Anyone that wants to reverse that, is dragging us back to the 1930s. We're not having it. We're not having it. Everybody here knows that. We're going to stand up, we're going to fight on, and we're going to not just have a 70th anniversary, we're headed for the 80th and beyond.
Folks, I just want to say, if people would like to take some of these, we need to be out this room by 9:30. So I'm really sorry I can't take anyone else. If people could take some of these and stay in your seats, those of you who are happy to have a photograph with, we're proud of our migrant NHS workers. We're going to try and take this photograph. Yeah. And don't forget, we need more of you to help our campaign, to get involved on our stalls, and please sign up for our newsletter. So if you can come forward, I think we'll